Hi, Zizaran here with another episode of Path of Exile University, and I am joined today by Professor Subtractem, really known for making great build guides, and he is going to teach you how to make your own build. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Zizaran, and thank you, chat.
The floor is yours. I'll take a back seat and enjoy the show.
Okay. All right, so today, as Zizaran just said, I'm going to be talking about making your own builds. My name is Subtractem, and I figured it would be good to start off with a little bit of an introduction. You guys might not be familiar with me. I'm kind of new on the scene, and I figured I'd give you guys a little bit of a background. I have a long history in video games and tech and everything in general. I am on the older side of folks in the content creator scene. And I think I have a little bit of a unique perspective based on just my history and how long I've been here and the different aspects of how I've been interacting with games and technology throughout my life. So I have been a software developer and game developer for over 20 years of my life. Starting in high school, I actually co-founded a video game company, and I've been in and out of tech and working on video games since then. Notable games that I've worked on that you may be familiar with are Farmville. Yes, that game. I was there during the whole crazy Silicon Valley stuff in San Francisco. There's a lot of crazy stories there. If you've ever seen the show Silicon Valley, that show is barely an exaggeration. That was crazy, man. Also, you may have heard of Spellbreak. It is a magic-based battle royale game. I did work on that, as well as Stream Legends. And I independently worked on a version of Tetris that was actually #1 on the iPhone App Store for a little while. It's a tiny little check mark for me. I've also been competing in video games for a long time at a fairly high level. I was one of the best Warcraft 3 players in the world at one point, and I had an offer actually to fly out to Korea and try out. I didn't have enough money for the plane ticket at the time, so I declined, and I finished my college degree. I don't know if that was for better or for worse, but that is the life that I live now. It's kind of fun to think about. I also am very passionate about fighting games. I have traveled to EVO multiple times. I've taken matches off pros in Street Fighter 4 and Marvel vs. Capcom. I'm pretty good at those games. I'm definitely not a pro. And I've been high masters / grandmasters in a variety of games across genres, from MOBAs to RTS games to first-person shooters. And this will all be relevant. Don't worry. And I've been playing Path of Exile since Parandus League version 2.2. I'm not as old school as folks like Zizaran. I haven't been playing since closed beta, but I have been playing for a long time. But also, with my history as a competitive game player, I don't have a hardcore Diablo 2 background. I only played it for a couple months back in high school. And so I think that, that gives me a little bit of a different perspective. I'm not really putting everything through the perspective of, like, how does this compare to doing a bunch of Mephisto runs or anything like that. I'm thinking of it more through the lens of my history. And I think that gives me kind of something unique to give you guys. In terms of my content and what I do, my inspirations are, and I'm purposely not calling out any Path of Exile creators. I don't want to make anyone, feel like they got missed or anything, but I do think we have a wonderful community here. But in terms of the vibe of my content, you can look at people like Choco Taco and Hafu that have really high-level gameplay with a chill vibe, very positive people. I also am a very big fan of folks like Day9 and Devin Nash, who do a really good job of kind of stepping back and giving a meta perspective on things, looking at things from, and this is very, very relevant to the next slide, from a higher level perspective, and talking about, like, behind the scenes ways that things are designed and the way that we can think about and build things. And then, this sounds a little silly, but I think it's a wonderful lesson. I was a bit of an angry boy back in my early 20s. And I think, you mellow out as you get a little bit older. And I think the world is just a better place if we look at people like Mr. Rogers and Bob Ross, and we kind of channel what they did and the positivity that they had in the world. And that's a big goal of mine, is to kind of, be a better person and bring that to everyone. Also, if none of that is enticing to you, I do have a very cute cat. His name is Zeus, and that is a picture of him. So if nothing else, I have that. Anyway, let's get started about making builds. All right, so I really wanted, going into this talk, I did a lot of research. And the big thing that I try to do with how I talk about things in my content in general, Path of Exile, etc., is I try to provide something that's a little different, a little new, a different perspective than you may have seen from other content creators. And kind of the theme that I get into, kind of why I mentioned people like Day9 and Devin Nash, is I like to take a holistic viewpoint at the world of whatever we're doing. And when it comes to build creation, there is a lot of wonderful content out there already. And in fact, doing my research, there was a PoE University called Build a Build exactly a year ago, where Ziz sat down with Noogie, and they spent a couple hours going into a ton of detail, going through Path of Building, looking at very, very specific ways that you can optimize the way that you put the character together, their way that they think about as the character's leveling up, like really optimizing, like, okay, I'm in solo self-found, I'm only gonna have 5 regret orbs. When I hit maps, make sure I'm taking the right points, things like that. And there's really great content out there. And when it comes to PoE, it's a very complicated game. And if I try to get too much in the weeds about a very specific thing, I could sit here and talk for 2 hours about just how to use PoB or just how to research different builds on PoE Ninja or anything like that. So I wanted to make something that is kind of complementary to the content that's already out there. And so I did a lot of research. I looked at all the stuff that's out there. And the thing that struck me is that there isn't a ton of content about, there's a whole part of going through the creative process and making a build that I haven't seen anyone talk about yet. And that's kind of what I want to get to when it comes to this. When you put something together, when you create anything and put it out into the world, there is this, it's this human thing to want to build something, and you have to get inspiration, and you have to have motivation, and these are things, and you have to have the tools. You have to know what all the tools are, and I want to kind of give a beginning and a process style view to give you guys the tools to be able to find things like the other PoE universities and the other ways to research things like PoEDB that Ziz was talking about a few minutes ago, to be able to teach yourself and be able to create a build, right? If I could walk you guys specifically through making one build, and you could say, okay, I could copy this and I could make this build exactly like he made it, but I want to give you guys the tools to be able to think about a whole framework of how you can teach yourself, even find ways for you to make a build in the way that you like that might be different from how I like. There's so many different approaches. We can do something that's like, I think it's totally valid to do something very organic or something that's memey on purpose. At the end of the day, this is just a video game, and the purpose of playing that game is to have fun. And if you're not having fun, what are we even doing here? The reason why I have that image in the upper right corner, kind of an example of what I'm talking about, I do this in general with my content, is looking at Toxic Rain, right? It is a build, it is a skill that's been around for a very long time. I guess not very, very long, but it's been around for a good amount of time. And it's a staple. It's just a core staple. Here's a good league starter. If you're brand new to the game, play Toxic Rain. And every 3 months, there's another set of Toxic Rain guys that comes out here. And I looked at it and just said, okay, why don't we just teach people how Toxic Rain works? And so I made a video this is how Toxic Rain works. Let's take a step back. Let's just teach someone everything about Toxic Rain. And once they understand that, and they have the tools for making builds themselves, they can actually create their own version of a Toxic Rain build. And I try really hard to give people a holistic viewpoint, which means stepping back, looking at everything that goes into it. So in terms of making a build, just as important is, getting into the nuts and bolts, looking at PoB, doing stuff like that, really, really testing and fine tuning everything, making sure your reses are capped. But I think just as important is you're going to be going for a walk outside and thinking, what kind of build do I want to make? How do you get inspired? How do you make those connections and have that motivation to finish it? Because making a build is, it's a lot of work, man. So that's kind of like the theme and what I'm trying to, I kind of want to subvert the expectations here and make something that's complementary to all the other content that's out there in the world. All right. So what the heck is a build? I think this is just, it's good to lay the groundwork and think about it from the perspective of what even are we doing when we're making a build? sometimes people zero in very specifically and they say, this is X type of build, or this is exactly what the build does. But if we look at it from a cohesive, full perspective, there are a whole bunch of different things that go into it. And, you might see that MTX line right there and you're thinking, well, that's kind of cheesy. But you know what? Certain builds, sometimes I just want to have that, I want to use that Celestial Herald device MTX. It just looks and feels beautiful. And in fact, one of the most common questions that I get is like, what is that MTX that you're using? And unfortunately, I have to tell them it's the combined set from a mystery box. And then I give them a frowny face because I don't even want to think about how much I had to pay to get that thing. But it does, in a power fantasy role-playing game, it is very important to make sure that what you're doing feels really good. The first time you have a nice Herald of Ice pop, the first time that you use a Gladiator Bleed pop or, Asnest Gentle Touch, that is a special feeling. And I think that's just as important into what goes into a build, in part of the motivation of making a build feel good to wanting to finish a build, because they are a lot of work. So what are the pieces that go into a build? So, and all of these, I'm not putting them in priority order. They're just the pieces that go into it. I'm starting with Ascendancy / your class, because that's actually what the game makes you choose first. No matter what, you have to choose this. It is something that goes into it, but it is not actually the critical, most important thing. I think that is proven by looking at things like Toxic Rain that are equally valid on Occultist, Pathfinder, and Raider, and Trickster these days. It is just a piece of the puzzle that you can put together and think about, and just think of it as an ingredient in your mixing bowl. Gems / skills. So this is the things that give you abilities. They can come from items or from your gems. What is the active or passive thing that you do that gives you offense, defensive, or utility characteristics? The passives on your passive tree, including the jewels that go into that, that is very important with cluster jewels these days. The items that you have equipped, as well as exactly what those items are doing. And then, as I said before, the MTX, the feel of the build, what it does. All of those combine to some sort of combination of offense, defense, and utility. The utility could be movement speed. It could be weird conditional things that happen based on timers, anything like that. And at the end, you get a character that you can pilot in the video game, and it does certain things. I also have this line here about archetypes. We're going to be staying away from getting into too much detail about archetypes. They are kind of shorthands for groups of mechanics that we can use as a starting jumping off point for talking about a group, emergent mechanics and emergent styles of builds. An example that you may have heard of is something like a cast on crit build, which requires you to use an attack that then will trigger a spell based on a critical strike. So we're not going to get into too much detail about archetypes. They're generally just more complicated, and that is something that I hope that I can give you guys the tools to be able to figure out yourselves a little bit later on. But I'm happy to answer questions a little bit later about those. So in this slide, as I said, offense, defense, and utility to accomplish a goal. What's a goal? So as always, the ultimate goal is to have fun. And if you are having fun and you're not hurting someone else's fun, just like in real life, everything that you do within the game is valid. Don't worry about comparing yourself to other people. Just make sure if you're having fun, as long as you're not being adversely affected by someone else, that is the goal of the game, and you're having a great time. And that's part of the reason why I think SSF is such a beautiful thing in the game, because it really shows that microcosm of how you can have fun in the game without worrying about other people. So in terms of the goals, there's a bunch of different layers about how we can think about it. The goal of either intrinsically or extrinsically why you make a build. So why you would want to make a build personally as yourself, maybe you just want to make a build, that you just might be motivated to, I just want to do it. It's an interesting thing. I've never tried it before, and I want to see what's involved in it. Totally valid. You could do it for educational reasons, perhaps self-education, or you want to show it to other people. That's a thing that, comes up a lot for me, obviously. And, or maybe you just want to show your friend, like, hey, your friend is asking you about how this certain mechanic in the game works, and you want to put together a really rough build. You send them the POB, and you can, stream on Discord or something, share it with your friend, and that can be a way that you can teach each other certain things about the game. Also, the act of creation or wanting to exercise your creativity. This is a very, very human thing. As I was practicing this talk, I was kind of I was reminded of going to shop class in middle school, and oh man, it was jank. It was so jank. But I built this little wooden box, and it was just a box with a single hinge that opened and closed. It was like a little wobbly, and I didn't perfectly sand everything down, and it just didn't. It wasn't the most beautiful box, but it was the thing that I had created, and I was very happy with it, and I was very proud of it. And sometimes as a human, we just want to exercise that act of creativity and creation. And even if what you make isn't the most beautiful thing, by going through that act of creativity, that act of actually making something, saying, I made this thing in the world, that's a very human and beautiful thing. And even if you do that and you share it with 1 or 2 friends, I think that is a wonderful thing. Or you may see a market gap in the marketplace of ideas, and you might be inspired by that. You might have read the patch notes and you see, oh, this thing was buffed, this thing is nerfed, oh, but this other thing was untouched. And by combining this thing that was untouched with this thing that was buffed, we just ignore that nerf thing. Everyone's looking at the nerf thing and like, oh, this build doesn't work anymore. And then you combine these 2 things, you can put this build out there, and you saw this gap in the marketplace of ideas, and then holy cow, what a wonderful feeling, you know. And also all of these ideas, all these goals, they are very, very interconnected, but I'm just trying to separate them out for the sake of demonstration. So these are examples of ways that you can be motivated yourself to make a build, and this is a very, very important thing. Making builds takes a lot of work. As anyone can attest that has made one, it is an act, oftentimes it is a solo act of a lot of dedication, especially if it's something that you are building POBs with leveling trees and everything, and you're sharing with other people. You need something to get that motivation to want to finish it and do it. And it's good to remind yourself of things like this and why you're doing something. Now, for the more traditional ways to think about it, what is the goal of that character in the game? There's all sorts of different things. I actually deleted some of the funnier ones, but that I'll mention in a second. But one of the most common ones is something like bossing. I just want a character that can kill bosses really, really easily. And I want to be able to face tank certain things, and I want to make it so I can just get in there, kill Cirrus. I don't have to worry about anything, and it's just gonna be clean and easy. On the flip side of that, I want a character that just maps really, really quickly. Excuse me. I want a character that just maps very, very quickly, gets through the maps really, really fast. I can kill up to T16 bosses very cleanly. Maybe it can kill like Awakener 5 Cirrus, but it's okay if it doesn't kill higher level bosses. It accomplishes the goal of the build. Or perhaps you're looking to participate in the new Zizaran / Shopify gauntlet, and you're super, super hyped, and you look at like what people have been doing in the previous races, and you see a little bit of a gap there, and you notice like, oh, everyone is really going towards champion and trickster. And they're kind of leaving Berserker there, like, oh, Berserker is really squishy. How do I make Berserker work? I want to be on the leaderboards for the next gauntlet. And, you can find this gap, and you just want to really explore what's going on there. So those are like kind of general ideas of like archetypes of builds that you can be looking at. And then you can drill down and get into even more specifics, and perhaps even make a build that hyper specializes. For example, you don't want just a bosser, you want a Cirrus bosser. And so you can do things like study exactly how Cirrus works, study exactly all of Cirrus's mechanics, and you can put the build together and test it against as many Cirrus fights as possible and fine tune it for that specific instance. You might make a build that is just there for a League starter. You can set yourself a certain budget that can be either be, okay, I'm in solo self-found, I want to make sure I'm only using things that I pick up. I will purposely not pick up that tabula that happened to drop in Act 2, and I'm gonna make sure that I'm using really, really budget items. Oh man, it is really dry in here. The autumn is coming, and there is so much pollen in the air. All right. Now, you also may, this is more advanced, you may be looking at group play. I was kind of laughing out loud a little bit because I had read the manifesto. I'm not going to spoil anything for Ziz reading the manifesto, but I was talking, I was practicing last night about group play, and I was laughing out loud a little bit about thinking about what group play is going to look like in the next patch. Spoilers, I think people are still going to be doing it, still going to be really, really strong. But you might be min-maxing your specific build because you want it to be in some sort of group dynamic. Also, you might be hyper specializing for a very specific deep delving boss or deep delving character. You want to make sure that, okay, I'm going to study people like Crouching Tuna and SK Cloudy, and I'm going to watch these people that delve really, really deep, and I want to make something that has my own twist on doing deep delve. Also, with the announced aspirational content, like the super blighted maps and the flawless breachstones that are coming out next league, this, I think, is a great opportunity for you to look at the new modifiers that are in there, and I think especially in hardcore and solo self-found, trying to figure out builds that can work in those contexts with the increased difficulty will be an interesting puzzle and challenge to try to overcome. Also, in addition, as always, fun is the ultimate goal. Maybe you just want to do something really, really fun and make a character that has the longest, as we saw recently, a 300-second leap slam, or the most armor in your hideout, or something really, really silly. That's not even mechanical or anything else, but it is technically a build. And as long as you're having fun, that's all that matters. And if you have that motivation, you're trying to put something together, those things are valid builds. And this is where we get extra subversive. So this is by far the most important slide in this entire presentation. And I think it's a little subversive in terms of the expectations, but I am going to be spending a good amount of time talking on this. I firmly believe that if you have the correct framework and process put together for learning to learn in Path of Exile, and being motivated to always do that as a background process, filling your brain with ideas and connections, that is actually where the inspiration and the pieces for making builds comes together. And I actually think that this is by far the most important thing, especially for beginners. PoE is an incredibly complicated game. There are dozens and dozens of hours of PoE University videos that are out there, and they're all important, good things that you will need to know, right? And it's being able to make a build, especially if you want to make a unique build, or know where the weaknesses are as you're going through the process of making builds, is your brain has to have that data in there, right? It's got to have all that information in there, and that really is the most important part. I will be getting to the process, like the specific way that I put builds together, but I think that, like, if you do what's on this, you put these frameworks together for your habits and your systems and your motivation for learning the game and having a good time doing it, then everything else is a little superfluous. I want to very, very much emphasize that just being aware of what's out there, fiddling with things, figuring out what works best for you is by far the most important part about all of this. So, game knowledge. What is it? Why am I even talking about it? It's a very kind of amorphous, high-level thing. It's definitely a little intimidating when you talk about it and you're starting into the weeds of how complicated the game is. But at the end of the day, PoE is incredibly, incredibly complicated. And if you want to either make a build for other people or specifically make a build that accomplishes a goal for you, you do have to be aware of as many things that are in the game as possible. I think even with my experience or even with Ziz's experience, we would never claim that we even know maybe more than 80% of what's in the game, because there's so many like really, really tiny fiddly things. And so enjoying the process, and there's things that constantly change. It's all about being able to adapt to those changes and divorcing yourself emotionally from those changes. And as long as you have that process for enjoying learning and getting, just you see a new thing and you're more excited than sad about it generally, as long as you can separate yourself emotionally, then you're just gonna have the right, the right systems in place so that making a build, killing a boss or anything, you have those systems, you have that way that you're getting more game knowledge, and you're just gonna be successful no matter what. Through this, I'm kind of applying my strategies that I've used to become like decent at some video games in the past. And I think it really equally applies to studying even just how to make builds in PoE. So what even is game knowledge? It's everything, right? It is everything in the game, but some examples are, what are the skills in the game? If you don't know what the skills are in the game, you almost like can't even start putting a build together, right? And at the very least, you have to know where to find the skills, where to look at them, and then you can kind of peruse them and maybe find something that inspires you. The mechanics in the game, you have to know how damage works, how defense works, how mobility works, how your character is able to get drops and progress your character, and like you have to know if your character is even going to level up when you put it together. I've definitely been guilty of recommending certain ways to level the character because that was my instinct, but I hadn't tested it. And without testing your assumptions, you might stall out and you might give some bad advice. No, not so. I say crafting here. It's not just knowing how to craft. It's knowing the modifiers that can go on those items. There could be really cool combinations of things that, at the very least, you can open up Path of Exile or PoE, look at those modifiers, and maybe that can be your source of inspiration. That can be your source of dealing with certain problems. A lot of putting a build together is just raw problem solving. Strategies. You have to know what people do in the game, right? So an example of that is, I made a build that is specifically tuned for farming Harbingers in Valdo's Rest. I made that build 2 leagues ago. People don't really do that anymore. The Nemesis 3 strategy where people really juiced up the maps down in Valdo's, that actually moved, and people are doing that in Turn's End, Glennick Cairns, Lex Proxima even, Lyra Arthane. And you being aware of what people are doing and being able to fine tune those builds to the things that people are doing, right? You don't want to build to fall flat because it's for some strategy that people aren't doing anymore. So just being aware of what people are doing, that can also inspire you to try to solve a new puzzle. Similarly, like what the meta is, that kind of ties into all of it. Maybe this is kind of like an inverse thing of knowing that, like, hey, no one is really making X class of type of thing. Like, no one's making an Ascendant that is using a lot of Juggernaut node, like using the Juggernaut nodes, or combining that with like Inquisitor, and like, oh, what a weird combination. And maybe you see like that can be a gap for you to explore and try to be inspired for your builds. But the most important thing for all of that is the objective adaptation to change. So, the most important thing, like I definitely, I enjoyed Harvest League a lot. I was very sad. I'm really, really big into crafting. And when Harvest got nerfed, I felt it. I felt it in my heart. But I took that, I processed those feelings. I didn't bottle it up. I processed those feelings, and I thought, okay, how am I going to so I put it first through the lens, how can I put together the builds that I've made in the past through the new lens of, I don't have access to things I had access to before, but also looking at what you have access to in the future and trying to be positive about all of that, keeping a positive mental attitude. And also, if you just don't see a path for anything that's fun, I really like to just go for a walk because sometimes the stress is too much, and it's better than I'm posting somewhere angrily. In terms of the resources that are out there, I am just, this is like the most simple and obvious thing, but I love just when I'm learning a game, when I'm first getting into a game, just reading a wiki, and especially building up a habit of reading the wiki occasionally. When I first started playing Don't Starve, which is a cute little survival game, the game has a lot of stuff. And I didn't know the stuff that was in the game. I would die on the first night, and I didn't know that I could, make friends with the pigs or whatever, yada, yada. And I built up the habit of, before I went to bed, I would just scroll through the wiki, and I would say, hey, I'm going to read about pigs tonight. And today I'm going to read about cooking recipes. And similarly, in Path of Exile, this has to be an intrinsic motivation, but as long as you can enjoy some sort of process of getting that information. So you build up the habit of like, okay, I'm on my lunch break. I'm just going to spend 10 minutes. I'm going to click on list of unique shields, and I'm going to read about a couple different shields. And I'm going to just it's all about putting all that data in your mental database. You don't even have to actively work at it. The big thing and the beautiful thing about making a build is letting that inspiration kind of come a little bit naturally. So it's just about like letting your neurons in the background make those connections. And you just have all those things in there, and maybe you're chatting on Discord with your friends one night, and you're like, oh man, Bone Shatter looks really, really cool, but I don't know how to deal with this thing. And then boom, oh, there's this one list of this one unique shield that I was reading about the other night, and it would actually like get rid of a lot of the self damage from Bone Shatter, and then I can scale something in a different way. And those motivations, like the more stuff that's in your head, the more natural connections that just happen, your brain will just do stuff. It'll just give you ideas. The work that you have to do is just get that information in there. So yeah, I really, really love reading the wiki. I don't do it as much as I used to, but I still like a couple times a week, I open up the wiki and I just peruse things. PoE.ninja, a wonderful website, but it is flawed, particularly when you're looking at builds. And so this does have to come with a caveat. Basically everything in Path of Exile does. But with PoE Ninja, they do their best, but they are limited by what the API allows them to do. So you do have to be cautious about certain things that you're looking at. There are people that game the system. They'll equip 10 Watcher's Eyes and it'll say 50 billion damage. Or like, they can only show people basically like level 99 and 100. So it's difficult to see the people that are leveling new builds. But there is a new daily build slice that you can look at, and you can use that to kind of just get some inspiration and see what people are doing, see combinations of things, see new builds that are out there. You can also click on like the meta skills, click on Forbidden Right, click the little X, and that actually does a negation search. And you can say, show me everything that isn't Forbidden Right. And you can use that to try to just get ideas. Like there are actually a lot of creative people out there that are putting together wacky builds. Some of them are better than others at doing certain things. But it's a really good way to just get motivation and inspiration and just see what's out there. And it's about putting those things in your head and just getting excited about what's out there. And your brain will do most of the work. Also, PoEDB.tw and Path of Exile, great ways to peruse modifiers. I love PoEDB specifically for if I am curious about like, okay, especially if I'm in hardcore, right? I want to know what did damage to me, how did I die? And PoEDB is absolutely spectacular for seeing the damage types, the different attacks that a monster can do. That's how when I first learned the Cirrus fight, I was like, I have good life, I have my endurance charges, I'm res capped, everything is beautiful. And then I went to PoEDB. Oh, Cirrus does over 25% chaos damage on everything. I was like, oh, my old style of just being, all right, I'm negative 60 chaos res, that doesn't work anymore. And that can be a great learning opportunity, especially if the goal of your build is to do some type of specific content. So yeah, definitely love PoEDB for that. Also, content creators. The fact that you guys are here, the fact that you guys are seeking out things from content creators, absolutely huge shout out, not to me, but to all of the PoE content creation community. It's incredible, right? Like, think about like, what's the average number of League of Legends streamers that make 90% of their content is educational, right? It's not the most common thing, right? And I think there's something kind of beautiful about the PoE community where, in general, we are just very, very dedicated to raising up the education level. Like, we understand that it's a very complicated game, and we are very interested in sharing our passion of this complex but fun and interesting game. And I think that's just a really, really beautiful thing. So, if the content creator is looking to, they want to help you, especially live on stream, feel free to throw your paste bin out there and have them, have Ziz roast it, but he'll also give you constructive criticism, right? It's all for fun. Anything like that with, the content creators try really, really hard to share their passion and help you guys do really, really good. Also, this is a tool that I've used in all of the games that I've played that I've tried to be successful in, is just watch, pause things, take clips, look at the VODs, and try to predict the future, right? So you see Ziz, he gets excited. Oh, I don't want to spoil, man, after reading the manifesto last night, I think I can't wait to see Ziz's reaction to it. But let's say he's gonna get excited about something, and he's gonna be trying to put together a build, again, that maybe he hasn't played in a while because he's really excited about the changes that are coming up. And you can watch him start to put the build together, pause it, right? Watch the VOD, pause it, and say, okay, Ziz is trying to do something in his helmet right now, right? And he's talking about a few different options and he's thinking about it. Pause the video and just be like, all right, So, write down some pros and cons, think about what the right option is, and then resume it and see what he does. And, start off with the assumption that he knows better than you, but, remember what your guess is. Say you guessed A and he chose B, and then he will say, okay, I chose B because, X, Y, and Z. And then here's the really fun part is that he goes into a map and he's like, oh, B wasn't actually the right choice. I should have gone A. And you can be like, I was actually like, Ziz figured it out after testing, but my instinct was actually correct. I have been learning, and it's a really good way to experience things. And like, it's when you line up with them, that you've learned, and it's a great way to just constantly educate yourself. That's how I've gotten good at the vast majority of games that I've played. Doing that with absolutely everything, like, watching a content creator do a boss fight, pause the boss fight, like, okay, Everlasting Flame, when Cirrus does that, very, very difficult. You pause it, you see, okay, he does Everlasting Flame, where does the person that I'm watching go? And then like say, okay, this is where I'm gonna go, resume it. Similarly, when you're making builds or anything, this applies to everything in life, every video game, carpentry, whatever. So that's one of my favorite tools that no matter what, I try to share with people. Also just experiment. This is such a complicated game that just trying different things is huge. You might think that, okay, well, the average person is saying that this mechanic is dead. You think about it, you're like, that just doesn't make sense. This mechanic seems really strong to me still. All right, just hop over to Blood Aqueducts, play around with a couple things, and then you might actually discover something that is counter to the average, what the average person is thinking. And that's a wonderful act of discovery. You can put a build around it, and it feels really, really cool. Also, just talking with people / going outside. What I really, really want to emphasize is the best, like many of the best things that I've ever done were inspired by talking with friends and like really, really smart coworkers. And, I have you're just better. You're just stronger and better. And like, you're more than twice as effective when you're interacting with someone else, bouncing ideas off them. Hang out in Discord, share your POBs with your friends, and they will just make sure that they're nice about their feedback. But it's a really, really good way that you can just like, say, hey, I just got this item called the Forbidden Shaco. It's early in the league. Everyone's selling this thing for 40 chaos. It looks really strong to me. Get in Discord with your friends, and your friends like, oh my God, that's a crazy thing. I bet you can make some crazy builds with that. And lo and behold, there you go. And then just go outside, go for walks. Even in preparing this talk or when I'm like really trying to min-max my builds or anything, I will take a lot of extra time and just walk up and down the street. At midnight, I'll just walk down the street. Sometimes I'll be talking to myself out loud. Sometimes I'll listen to some music. Sometimes I'll listen to nothing. I'll listen to the frogs in the pond or something, and ideas will just come to me. And I think it's a very, very important part of the process of anything creative. And if you have the ideas in the back of your head, then things will just come together. And I think that, like, I know that all of this is very fuzzy, and in the back of your head, you might be thinking like, okay, how do I actually make the build after that? But it's crazy. Once you have the amount of knowledge in your head and you even like attempt poking at something, it'll almost come semi-naturally. I really, really think that erecting this foundation of acquiring knowledge is the most important thing to doing anything in any video game or basically anything in life. So in the words, and the most important thing is also if you can enjoy that process. In the words of one of my favorite authors, Brandon Sanderson, journey before destination. All right, so now let's stop subverting expectations quite as much, and let's start getting into a little bit more of the detail. But we're still going to be a little touchy-feely. So as I said before, inspiration is very, very important. When I put a build together, I generally start from the idea, and it's simple and effective. Is you start from the idea of just like, this skill looks cool. I like this skill. I want to build around this skill. And then you can layer on top of that. I think that this ascendancy is cool. I think that this unique is cool. Anything like that, that just feels good and motivates you, and you want to build around that. You want to start from that really raw building block. After that, start putting some pieces together, and you want to understand like Okay, Stormbind looks really, really cool. I saw the Path of Exile, video, and they showed Stormbind, and man, that is a beautiful skill. Before you put in too much effort of really putting a build together, take that puppy down to Blood Aqueducts and just see if you like it. In terms of Stormbind, I could not make that thing feel good in a way that fit me, but all builds and everything is personal. If that is a thing that you absolutely love and you want to build around it, go crazy. So those are, like, when I'm putting a build together, those are really the first two things that are in my head. What is something cool and fun that really inspires me? And also, so like the way that I think about builds in PoE is, it's complicated. There's a lot of numbers, but at the end of the day, we are sitting in a sandbox and we got some Play-Doh over here. We got Legos. We got a little dump truck. We can put some sand in it and kind of push it around. And that's really all it is, right? This is a PvE game. Maybe you're going to compete the DPS charts, or you're in a race or something. It's a little bit more specific there. But in general, besides like, okay, I want to get 40 out of 40 on my challenges, it's just a straight up PvE game. And the most important thing that you can do to make sure that you don't burn out and you have fun is you just are motivated to do it and you think what you're doing is fun. So you want to make sure that the build that you're putting together feels good and you like it. As long as, if the build is for you. So for me, I spend a lot of time testing what the build feels like, even like before, like with very, very few, like 10% of the pieces put together. And then once I'm happy with that, then I start thinking about things like offense, defense, and getting the items together for putting the build. So generally, if you're in softcore, you will have a certain threshold of acceptability for dying. The most important thing in softcore is usually scaling your offense. In hardcore, you're going to want to invert that. You're going to make sure that there's a very low threshold for death in hardcore. And I generally think of, if I'm putting together a hardcore character, I want to make sure that the defenses are sorted out. There are a bunch of like solve templates for ways that you can solve defense. Study builds that are out there in hardcore, but you want to make sure that that's sorted out before you try anything else. And then this is the very, very important thing. And this is something that I kind of didn't think was as important when I got started. But more and more, I've learned how important it really is the cost and availability of everything that goes into the build. There's a lot of considerations that you have to do, especially when you're recommending a build to other people in softcore trade. And then in SSF, it's a whole different type of consideration for the availability of things. Like in softcore trade, you might be looking at, oh man, Doriani's prototype. This is a cool looking unique. I really, really like it. I am starting to put together a build that's feeling really, really good. Be cautious. Be cautious. Like, study what other content creators are doing. Study PoE Antiquary. This is a beautiful website that allows you to look at historical data over time across all of the many past leagues and see like what the general value of that unique is. But make sure that those uniques will be available, especially when you recommend the build, because if you're making it for yourself, right? If you're going to get into that, check PoE Antiquary, check the PoE trade website, make sure that it's within your budget. And Mathil could release a build tomorrow that is using Doriani's prototype, and then the item, and it's a really, really good build, and then the item will just have low availability for the next 2 weeks, and then you're going to feel really sad that you recommended something that no one can play. And SSF, that hopefully if you're going into SSF, that you're going in and that you're playing hard mode, right? You're taking on a certain challenge, and you have to take extra consideration when it comes to availability of items. As Ziz said a few minutes ago, you also have to take into consideration what the league is. In Expedition League, the availability of uniques is much higher, but you might want to think about, okay, this is the availability of the certain uniques that we're going for, but if Expedition doesn't go core, maybe, if you want to make this a living build that you're going to update and you're going to recommend to people in the future, perhaps perhaps if Expedition League goes away, you're not going to be able to get that carcass jack on, day 3 in SSF, right? So you're going to want to really, really consider the availability of things, especially if it's SSF hardcore. You're going to want to make sure that maybe there's some core defenses that can be taken care of as your character is leveling up. You want to make sure that it's a very strong build all the way through, and there's no weak points. So that's like the high level process of how I start thinking about the bits and the pieces. And then let's get into the detail of the process of how I put those pieces together. So, Ziz might recognize this. I actually have been there. I took that picture. That is in the sculpture garden. I think it's in Oslo, in Norway. And it's a very, very funny sculpture garden. If you get the, he usually is not wearing shorts. If you ever get the chance to go there, it's very, very cool. So, carving the statue. This is a way I'm gonna talk about as many different processes that you can go to for putting together a build, but it's really about mix and matching, trying things, anything creative, anything engineering-wise, anything constructive. At the end of the day, it comes down to your personal process, your personal preferences. It's really just like, get motivated and try something. Even if there's no such thing as being wrong, as long as you're learning something, as long as there's some part of that process that's happening. If you just want to, it's very, very similar to just like, I want to learn how to run. All right, well, how do you learn how to run? You run, right? And there's a lot of detail into that. There's learning how to run everything. You might hurt yourself the first time you go for a run because you just didn't tie your shoes properly or something. There's a lot of detail that goes into it. But if you don't even take that first step, no matter how much you study, no matter how much you just watch hours and hours of things, if you never open up POB, if you never actually like go to Blood Aqueducts and start playing around with things, you need to take that first step, and you need to learn the things that fit you and really work with the process that clicks with you. So this is kind of my analogy for how I think about making a build. Is you have this big block of marble in front of you, and you have a general idea of what it's going to look like, and it's it's going to be a person. He's got a head there. Well, I guess we can use this example. He's going to have one leg up, and he's going to be kicking a baby. He's going to say, "Get those babies off me." And you have a general idea of what the thing's going to look like. But let's just say he's supporting the baby's back, and he's just making sure that it doesn't hit its head on the way to the ground. It's not actually violent. He's doing his best to support all of his children. So how do you even get started? So you're motivated, right? Let's get motivated. And you know that you want to do something that is using a certain skill, and you don't know where to go from there. There's a couple different ways that you can kind of get started, but no matter what, you're going to be, even if you're like mega giga brain, I can just plug everything in a POB and I kind of know how things are just going to shake out. You're still going to start with the rough, broad strokes. You have your statue of marble, or you have your slab of marble, and you need to take that giant sledgehammer and just like bonk off some giant corners. And the way that I think about this is you just really are testing some fundamental assumptions that you have to make sure that this is something even worth, you don't know if in the middle of that slab, there's actually these like disgusting cracks or something, or it's been all like destroyed by, certain tectonic plate shifting or something. So you gotta be really careful, and, the opposite of careful. You just wanna make sure that this is gonna be okay. So what I usually do in this thing is, at this stage, is either I go into POB and I just say, all right, this gem, this item, and does POB tell me that these don't even work together? And okay, POB, and you can start with either, however works best for you. And okay, POB says that these work together, good enough. I'm not gonna think about anything else. I'm just gonna go to Blood Aqueducts. I'm gonna take my simple little character, and I'm going to slot in different gems. I'm gonna slot in like a single gem with like 1 or 2 support gems, and I'm just gonna go up and down the line. I'm just gonna run to the end and see, does this feel good? As I said before, feel is a very, very important thing to me right here. Like, is the playstyle and fluidity of the gameplay to your tastes? If you're specifically making a build for yourself, you just want to make sure that thing feels good, right? I've made builds that I've gone out, I've tried. Very, very important as part of that knowledge gaining is trying as many builds as possible, getting that knowledge, and knowing what things intimately feel like. And there's some things that I just know that I don't enjoy now because I have tried them. And go to Blood Aqueducts, even go to the quarry, try out as many things as possible. Make sure that core broad stroke that you're attempting feels good. Question those assumptions ASAP. You don't want to be further down the line. Oh, okay, I got my offense, my defense finely tuned. This feels really good. I put 20 exalts into this. And then you go into your first red map and you just hate the rhythm of pressing the buttons. Your flats aren't always up. Just feels really, really icky. You want to start and really start with those core big broad strokes. So like what I like to do at this point is I'll start off with blood. I'll constantly be going between blood aqueducts, POB, testing certain assumptions, and then I will try a white map, then a yellow map, then a red map. I might not be at the point where I can do yellow or red maps, but at least I try to push it and see like, okay, at this level investment, how does it feel? Really just like, imagine if you are working on, your little crappy box in shop class, and you have infinite wood over on the side, and you want to try these different cuts, and you don't have anything to really measure properly. So all you can, like the best thing that you can do is, well, you got something to measure. You got like one ruler to measure, but you don't have like a nice protractor or anything. So you got like one ruler, which is POB, so you can measure things. And then you can go to blood aqueducts. You can, take a cut like, that didn't look how I expected it to. Throw that box away. You got infinite wood. Take the box out again. All right, I need to make sure that this cut is good so the lid seals nice and properly. And like this is a total experimentation phase, just going between all of the different tools that I have available to me. Also, what I highly, highly recommend is if you are building, when I'm trying to test assumptions for a hardcore character, use standard. Especially if you have resources in standard, you can put those pieces together, and then you want to test everything that you can, really, really fine tune it and make sure that your character doesn't die. If I'm going to make a build for hardcore, I test absolutely everything I can. I make sure I test different map mods, I test different bosses and everything. And if that character ever dies, right, I can keep testing things, I can keep fine tuning it, but that character dies, okay, well, how did I fail my hardcore character? How did I fail my build? And that's a great tool that you can use to like make sure that you're like fine tuning those, like for hardcore, those are kind of the broad strokes. And then the next step, right? So we knocked off the really big corners of the statue. It's like roughly the same size as a human, but that's it. There's no detail. Now we need to start chiseling things out and making sure that this looks like an arm, this looks like a leg up here, and do all that type of stuff. This is where I start thinking about skill and item synergies in general. So, okay, I know that I'm going to be using Frostblades or something like that. I know the skill that I'm going to use. I know that I like the feel of the skill. But after that, how does the rest of the build fit together? Like, am I going to use Frostblades with Whirling Blades to get around? Am I going to use Shield Charge with Fortify? What am I going to do to like really, I'll rip in peace on that one. What am I going to do for the overall full feel of the build? What are like all the pieces? What's my mobility? What auras? Start considering the auras that I'm going to be reserving. Double check in POB, like if I don't have like an Enlightened level 4 or RMR in my helmet or anything like that. What are the auras that I'm looking to reserve offensively and defensively? This is where I start to hammer out like what all my different skill gems that I'm thinking about equipping are. But everything is always in flux. Also, all of this, I always want to emphasize, you can do all of this in whatever order you want. This is not prescriptive whatsoever. Find what works for you. Some people want to start off with, I want to make sure that this number is exactly the number that I want. I want exactly 10,000 hit points. I want exactly 100% crit chance, and then they can backfill everything and actually do the opposite. And results are what matter. Like the process is tailored to yourself. Find what fits you. Try everything that's out there and find what feels good for you. All right, so we figured out the general gems that we're going to use. We chiseled off everything. It looks like a person. He's doing this. He's supporting his children that for some reason are just jumping at him very aggressively. He wants to make sure that all the kids are held up and they're able to grow up nice and healthy and go to college and have wonderful families in the future. So now we need to chip away at things. We need to make sure, like, okay, we need to get the striations in the musculature. We want to make sure he has a face and some eyes, like start putting some detail in the hair, all that type of stuff. We need to like chip away. And this might seem a little weird to put it here, but this is where I think this is more of coming from the veteran perspective. For you, if you're newer, you may want to solve for this a little bit earlier because you might not have quite the game knowledge yet to know how you're going to scale certain of these numbers. But this is where I especially double check in POB to ensure that I can hit certain numbers that are important for my build. For example, if I want to kill Maven, like the point of this build is make Maven as clean and nice as possible. I want to make sure that I hit, this is just a rough number, I want to hit around 8 million DPS to make Maven even like feel really doable. If I'm a synchronous damaged character, if I have to actively attack, actively cast to kill Maven, to do damage to Maven, I want to make sure I'm doing around 8 million DPS. If it's damage over time asynchronous, I think roughly around 5 million is doable, but it might, that's like on the low end. Similarly, if you're a lab runner, like you take into account all sorts of different types of builds, what the purpose of your build is. If your goal is to be a lab runner, you want to do some sort of self-chill Scold's Bridal setup, and you have a Pathfinder with your juiced and kindling orb flasks and everything. You want to go super, super fast. Your goal is to get #1 on the lab running ladder. Rip in peace on that one. Hopefully it comes back. But your goal is to just go really, really fast and get on, be on the ladder, right? Or at least you can compare your time with the other racers that you know. And, or, you're gonna be in the gauntlet, right? And you want to make sure that like, Ziz talked to GGG and he found a way for them to give all the bosses like 10 times chain with Vengeance Cascade with 10x extra projectiles and everything in the next gauntlet. And you want to solve for how do I make sure that my defense is configured in such a way that extra projectiles and chaining projectiles doesn't kill me. You're going to look at things like your Pantheon or different defensive skills and stuff like that. So it's all about specifically tuning to certain things. And I do this in the middle step, but depending on your confidence for certain things, you may want to do this a little bit earlier. Now, okay, it's chipped away. It's looking really nice. It's looking like a good statue, but there's still like the hands look like they're webbed. It looks like hair, but it doesn't really have too much detail to it. We need to sand things down and just like get off those like final rough edges on the corners. This is where you can start to get into min-maxing stuff, but perhaps not. For me, it's thinking about quality of life in general. Now, some builds, you don't care about ailments. All builds, you generally care about hitting res cap, but also things like flask uptime, especially after 3.15 and all those changes. This is where I want to sand things down and make sure that the build feels smooth throughout all sorts of different content. And then as always, if you ever don't have confidence about certain of these things going into it, you can skip a step and go forward and work on that. But this is where I think about things like I actually record my gameplay and I look over it and I say, or a lot of it can just be innately in feel, test things a lot, test. Just like really notice that like, okay, my build is really, really good. I'm a hardcore player. I'm testing everything I can. But when I get those Fizz's Extra Lightning skills specifically, when I'm doing a map with Fizz's Extra Lightning, I'm testing my character in standard, my character dies once in a while. Record that gameplay, look over it and realize like, oh, that's Fizz's Extra Lightning with extra crit. I'm getting shocked and I didn't solve for getting shocked. I thought about freeze, I thought about ignite, I'm poison immune. I did a wonderful job of solving for everything else, but test things as much as possible and really make sure that every little bit of your build solves for the things that you really, really care about. I actually, for me, I've run into this with the build that I'm actually testing right now is some of my characters right now this league that feel really, really good. I've taken some of the flask nodes that give me more flask charges and more flask effectiveness and uptime. And the character that I'm testing right now, he's a little too far away to get those nodes. And every third pack, my flasks aren't quite up. My character's not quite fast enough. He's more of a, more of a little bit of a slower tanky guy. And my flasks aren't always up. And it feels kind of bad. And I'm thinking, how do I problem solve this? This entire process is about looking at what a problem is, identifying it, and letting that game knowledge percolate in the back of your head, start poking around with things, talk with your friends, use all of those tools that are available with you, and really exploring what you're able to do within that problem. After sanding, the statue looks really, really good. You can put it out on your front lawn and you can be proud of it. It looks great. Everything is feeling really, really nice. The ailments are good. That res cap is good. You making sure that you have your flasks up available. You can go into the boss room. You don't have to wait for certain cooldowns to trigger anything. You just hit your vol skill and one-shot the boss. Boom. Build is clean, feeling good. You're proud of it. There's always that last, 1 to 5%. And so this, if you want to make your statue, you just got a letter from the Queen of England, and she's like, hey, I want your statue in the Buckingham Palace. And you're like, oh my God, my statue is nice, but how do I make this worthy of the Queen of England? That's my best Queen of England impression. I actually have no idea what she sounds like. So how do I make my build worthy of, sitting in front of the, being in the middle of the Queen's Palace? This is where I really like playing my builds for a long time. And at the very least, I like considering what my build can be in the future, and what, like, if I really play this build for 1 or 2 months, like I get connected to my builds. It is a creative output. It's something that like I want those things in standard enshrined that I can go back to and have memories of what that build was, what it meant to me. And this is where I really like to, if I love a build, I will polish the crap out of it, and I will just make sure that, okay, my resistances on the build, I have, 80 across the board. My Wise Oak is perfectly tuned. I have a crit-based build, and I have exactly 100% crit. I have no resource wasted. This is where you can go to POB. You can, show node power. You can like really look at all of the different nodes on your passive tree, making sure that you don't waste a single little bit of your passive tree. You can look at your gear, and you crafted something, and it's got you closed your eyes and you slammed on 2 life regen, or your Awakener orbs that hit stun and block recovery, and you're like, I can do better. The Queen's not gonna like this. She's just gonna kick me out. I'm never gonna get that knighthood. All right. PoE.sale. Also, if you don't know, fun little fact, there's a quick shortcut. You can go to PoE.sale, and it brings you straight to the trade website. It's really, really nice. Anyway, I type in PoE.sale, and I go, all right, Awakener's Orb, Whisper 10 people, buy the Awakener's Orb, craft get a new body armor, and I get rid of that stun and block recovery. And I really make that build fit for the Queen. I think after the sanding step, it's 100% a well-tuned, nice build. But if you really want to play that thing for a month or 2 months, or you want to play the build for as many leagues as you even possibly can, it's a build that you want to upload to YouTube. You're gonna update the POB every single day, and really, really ensure that this is a build that lives on for a very long time. Then consider what can be done with the build. Consider the build in solo self-found. Consider a hardcore version of the build. Consider you want to share what this build can be in every single facility. Now, your build just might not be solo self-found viable. It might just, my build doesn't work until I have a Starforge. And in that situation, then you just kind of have to deal with it, and you say, sorry, solo self-found guys, I love you, but this build just doesn't work for you guys. But perhaps consider these options. You can tell folks that, these are things I've thought about for solo self-found, but that's all we got. So combining the game knowledge and going through these processes for putting a build together, as long as it's about taking that first step and making sure that you're able to go between these different steps, consider the problems, and use the tools that are available to you to really hammer out and figure out what your build wants to be. And always test everything and every single circumstance. Probably would be helpful. I forget all the time. I probably should also make a checklist myself for sometimes I do forget I didn't think about what leveling from Act 5 to 7 might be on this build, or I didn't think about what okay, solo self-found, this is really good to start the build, but then the way that I'm thinking about scaling the build, I didn't really consider that, and it's complicated, man. And the best you can do is consider all the options, put everything out there that you can. If you are doing this for an audience, consider everything, be very generous and helpful with people that ask questions and give you criticism. And if it's for yourself, just make sure that it's really, really fun. So in terms of making a build, this is the big stuff that I want to get across. Game knowledge, thinking about process, and carving that statue, being able to go forward and backward. And I have a couple case studies here. Hopefully, you guys might not be able to read all the text on the screen. I actually try to cut it down as much as possible, but there's just a lot of text. I have a couple of case studies for some builds, for 2 builds that I did this league and that I wanted to share. So you're in class. I realized this as I was putting the presentation together. you know, you're in class, your teacher's like, all right, here's this formula, here's that formula, here's that formula. This is how math works. Go do your homework, right? That never clicked for me. I often learn the best by sitting down with someone who knew this stuff and them actually just telling me what the heck was going on and showing me an example. So I really, really wanted to, you know, make sure that I could get this in as well. So also the 2 case studies that we're looking at, the 2 builds from mostly this league, and I built them in 2 totally different ways. So hopefully this can be instructive so you guys can see that it is a totally fluid, weird, creative thing that at the end of the day, as long as you have a build at the end, you're successful. So I made a Bane Occultist. This is probably, and this is definitely my most successful build that I've ever made, to the point where the helmet enchant and the staff that I recommended had a little bit of a Subtractem effect this league. And yeah, the helmet enchant, I think it was going for like 10x at one point. Mr. Khan, who's a lab runner, he was very, very happy about that. But the build started from very, very humble beginnings. And so, you know, how did this even get started? So I was an ultimatum lead. I had I generally have really bad league starts. That's another thing I would love to encourage you guys. Don't compare yourself to other people. Don't stress about league starts. You know, putting a build together can happen anytime. Don't worry about that. I had an awful league start, and I didn't like, you know, where I was. I only had a handful of results. I didn't know what to do a handful of days into the league. And so I just opened up the patch notes. You know, I was looking for inspiration for a build to play. I wasn't even specifically looking to create a build at this point. I just wanted something to be able to play the game. And I read through the patch notes, and Death's Oath was buffed. And I was like, well, Rise QT is a big Death's Oath guy. I've never really played it. I tried it once a long time ago, but with not a lot of investment. And with the numbers going up, there must be something to it, right? So I went to PoE Ninja. I looked up what the Death's Oath builds were. I just middle-clicked. I opened the tab for like 5 different people that had done Death's Oath builds. And I took like kind of the common denominator between all of those builds and put together my own version of it. I played Death's Oath Occultist for a while. It was really, really fun. Ultimatum League with Death's Oath, with Profane Bloom and Withering Step, and, you know, doing that chaos damage and Explodey felt really, really nice in tier 14 maps. People have actually adapted recently to make it better for single target. But at this time, Death's Oath felt really bad for me for single target. I kind of have a personal thing with my builds is I like bossing, man. It is one of my favorite things in the game. If I can't, like when I spawn Cirrus and Maven, if I can't fight them, if I don't have a build capable of fighting them, I'm sad. Like, oh, I don't want to ask someone to kill my Cirrus for me. I just that's for me. That's me time. So I was like, all right, well, I don't know how to scale this right now. You know what? I really like. So I'm doing a chaos. I'm an occultist. I'm doing chaos damage, and I just went to the gem vendor. I typed in chaos, and I just opened up. I just looked at every single tab, and I looked at what was there. You know, generally just the blue scale gems. And I was like, oh, Bane. I remember Bane. I played it when it first came out, and that was a very cool skill. What Bane does, if you're not familiar, it is a chaos skill that just casts in an area. It does not hit. It applies the curses that are linked to it. It also has base chaos damage as part of the gem, and it gets a more damage multiplier based on the number of curses that are linked to it. And I was like, that's a very, very cool skill, especially if I'm doing Ultimatum League, I'm in close quarters, and I'm able to just, like, if I scale my AoE on my Bane, I can hit a lot of the monsters at the same time. So I was like, all right, let's see what's out there. Let's crowdsource the information. And I just looked at what the Bane Occultists were on PoE Ninja, and I just straight up copied one of them. Or I looked at I generally will take a confluence of a bunch of different ones, and I'll see what looks the best to me, and I will just put that in. But, you know, if you don't have that experience to modify something, start off with a carbon copy. There's no shame in that. But I noticed there were a lot of sockets that in the gear for gem sockets that didn't feel particularly effective or efficient for what I wanted to do. And so I got to thinking, I really don't like Wither Totem setups. You know, especially if I'm an occultist, I'm already automatically withering. With Withering Step, especially with an alternate quality Withering Step, I'm applying all my wither charges like basically all the time anyway. The common thing that people were doing was using a 4-link Wither Totem setup. and you're managing the Wither totems, and you're already applying Wither in a whole bunch of other ways. That felt like a waste of 4 sockets. So I went back to the gem vendor, I typed Chaos, and I looked at what was there. Ooh, Void Sphere, that's a newer skill that not many people are doing too much with. We're doing a circle league. We're running in a circle. There's a whole bunch of really cool things about Void Sphere. It pulses. It has a duration, and since I'm a chaos damage over time occultist, I'm scaling my duration a lot already. And using some of, I think it's Wish for Death, using certain notables from Cluster Jewels, I'm actually able to get Culling Strike on my Void Sphere. So I linked that actually to Second Wind, increased area of effect, and what else did I link it to? I think increased duration. And I had a Void Sphere where I could put it in the middle of the ultimatum, and it would continually pull the monsters in. It would hinder them, making them take more damage based on some things that I had. And it would automatically Culling Strike them, and it would, it would give me a very nice defensive layer. And since I was scaling duration, it lasted 12 seconds. It was up 100% of the time during an ultimatum. So very, very cool. I actually made a build guide for it. It was a great league starter. I put that whole build together for 3 exalts. I was very happy with it. It accomplished my goals, and I had a good time. All right, fast forward to Expedition League. And then I moved on. I played other builds. Then fast forward to Expedition League. Whew. So I did like a little bit of a challenge with my chat and in my community, and they voted for what my league starter was going to be. They are cruel, cruel people, and they voted for Summon Reaper. Especially on release, Summon Reaper was in an awful, awful place. To say the least, my first week of the league start, and I tried everything I could to make it work within a very low budget. And my first week was rough. The Expedition League was, so it was a bad start. So what did I do? I wanted to go back to old trusty. I put together my Bane Occultist as it was before. It felt really good. And especially with the changes that had happened in 3.15, gigantic sweeping changes to everything getting nerfed across the board. And Bane still felt almost as good as it did in 3.14. Can I scale this and make this just like my end game build? So I spent some time thinking about it. I opened up Path of Exile. I did open all groups, and I typed in, chaos damage over time multiplier, anything like that. And I searched for every single modifier that was on all of the gear. And I just I had the game knowledge and the process for researching what's out there. I didn't even know before I started, but I knew where to look for things. And I saw that I could use an Essence of Delirium on gloves, used Apothecary's gloves, which gives you damage over time. And that gives you a 30% more damage over time multiplier for socketed gems. That means I can actually put in an additional damage skill and have that as a pseudo 5 link instead of just having ED with Bane. And so by doing this, I actually put Blight in there, Vol Blight specifically, and I threw away my Void Sphere setup because also Expedition League, no longer a Circle League. Let's fine tune the build for the league that we're playing. And so I have a pseudo 5 link in my Vol Blight. Also, because of all the nerfs and because of what people usually use Awaken Controlled Destruction for, I was buying Awaken Controlled Destructions for 20 chaos. They were dirt cheap. I have 3 of them in my build. So you can look at the price and availability of things. Something that you may have been looking at in the past for how you want to put your build together may now be cheap in the future. So that is one of the changes that I made. Also, due to the Support Gems nerf, traditionally with Bane, you would double curse and you would just link a few other just damage gems. But because they nerfed the damage support gems so much, adding a 3rd curse actually ended up being much more damage. And this is the example. This is where I was talking about the objective adaptation to change, right? So people saw the gem nerfs, right? And they saw all the gem nerfs and like, oh, Awaken Controlled Destruction is really, really crappy. Oh God, efficacy is so bad now. Oh, skills that use efficacy are garbage. I'm never gonna use them. Oh, this sucks. And I agree, that it did feel bad. But it basically what it looked like is efficacy was let's say 100% very good. Punishment was possibly, instead of efficacy, was possibly actually better, but because the common knowledge was to use efficacy, and especially since POB didn't directly tell you that punishment was gonna let you do more damage, everyone was using efficacy, but by nerfing that, it forced us to be creative and think about what else was there. And so I reworked the build to be a triple cursing build. And by putting in punishment, which got a gigantic boost from when they reworked low life to be 30% to 50%, I got a gigantic damage boost and also putting in Vol Blight. So what I did is I stacked reduced mana reservation. I also added an aspect of the spider. I believe my build has something like 480% increased damage taken or something to monsters with increased curse effect and all the scaling. And then I looked at like how people in the past had traditionally scaled the build, and everyone was doing low life with a bow. That was like the traditional way to do it, is they would just use a shavs, and then they would just use a bow that had plus gem levels. They would be scaling their ED alone as much as possible, trying to scale their single target. And I thought, that like, that has like a ceiling on your DPS, right? Like those builds are doing less than 10 million DPS with everything combined. What can I do? And I, did my little thing, went to Path of Exile, searched for chaos gem levels that I know, due to my study, my game knowledge experience, that scaling gem levels up to level 30 actually gives you a 10% damage boost up to level 30. And so that's actually the most efficient way to scale those gems. And then it goes to 5% after. And so I looked at, where can I get gem levels? Everyone's using, obviously people are trying to use gem levels in their bow, and that's a really good way to scale ED. But I opened up all the weapons, and I noticed that on a staff, you can get +5, you can get +2 all skill gems and +3 chaos skill gems. I looked on PoE trade website. No one cared about it. There was a gigantic hole in the market, and I was able to get a staff with +3, with fractured +3 chaos skill gems for 2 exalts. And I went to Path of Exile. I calculated what it would take for fossils. For just a couple exalts more, I crafted a beautiful staff that makes me do insane amount of damage. And then in the end, with my Bane, ED, and Blight combined, I have a build, a chaos damage overtime build that is pretty darn tanky. It slows the crap out of monsters. It hinders them. Everything that does over 18 million DPS. The picture in the upper right corner, if you're able to see it, is a screenshot from me doing a challenge on stream of me doing a zoomed in with my glasses off, with my hand, with the mouse in the wrong hand, the Feared, that's rolled up, rare, and difficult. And I think I died only once doing it. That's just like, and the common assumption is that essence drain and chaos damage over time is in a weak place in 3.15. This is one of the strongest builds I've ever made, especially for bossing. I can basically do the Feared with my eyes closed. And it was by exploring what's out there, questioning assumptions, and objectively adapting to what's out there. And all of this is from a simple template start of looking what's on PoE Ninja, exploring that, and then questioning the assumptions of what people are doing. And this is one of my happiest builds that I've ever made. So that is one style of making a build. Let's go to the opposite. So this build. So I had this beautiful Bane character, right? It can do basically everything in the game except for T19 100% Delirious maps. It by far demolished the goals that I set for it. But at my heart, I like to go kind of fast. Raider's my girl. I like to run really, really fast. My history as an action game player, I play Ari, I play Jet, I play a Tracer. I like to zoom, I like to go fast. I'm a high mobility style player. And I always need a very, very fast character every league. For me, when it cuts for an ARPG, the action for me is very, very important. I like dodging things. I like, running really fast. And so I needed something zoomy. I wanted a Raider. Cost was absolutely no object, but I also wanted to be very, very hipster. I wanted to be fast and I wanted to be hipster because I just wanted to experiment. I wanted to push the boundaries of what I was capable of. So this was a pure, messy experimentation process. It took me a whole month to finally fine tune and put this build together. But it's something that I'm very proud of. And this is the statue that goes in your front yard. This is not a statue that you say, oh, I'm gonna just copy paste this statue. I'm gonna send it to a factory and then it's gonna print out. This is a kind of a vanity project for myself. And I really wanted to show that there is something special to making that just you made this build for yourself. Even if no one else in the world knows about it, you can be proud that you created something unique and interesting and fun and personalized to yourself. And I think that's very, very important. So I wanted to cast spells on a raider and go fast. So I don't know where I came up with this. I think it just came out of like the silly part of the back of my head. I was looking at Voltaxic Burst. Voltaxic Burst looks so cool, guys. But yikes. Voltaxic Burst looks really, really cool. It's a skill, it's a spell that you cast it. It has a timer, it puts like a buff on you. And then after X number of seconds, it'll explode. It'll do hybrid lightning chaos damage, and it will do like a nice explosion. So I wanted to, self-casting, generally not the most fun thing in the game. What's fun? Cast on crit, cast while channeling, slingers, stuff like that. That's just what, that's like a core archetype of just what feels good in Path of Exile. So I thought I wanted to go super hyper mega ultra Voltaxic Burst hyper diaper. That's something else, I guess. I wanted to try charge dash because I had never done it before. And it's a lightning attack. It's like maybe there's some sort of synergy between charge dash and Voltaxic Burst. And cast while channeling. Since charge dash is a channeling movement skill, I thought, okay, I can sit there and do my charge dash. And if I can get everything to line up just perfectly, when I let go of charge dash, boom, that is when the Voltaxic Burst will burst. And it'll be a really nice, beautiful explosion that proliferates, kills the entire screen. Very, very cool. So there's no way that POB, that no one else on the planet was doing this. No one was doing that on PoE Ninja. And there's no way that POB can tell me that if that feels good or not, right? That is mechanically just a weird thing that you just gotta test it. So I went to my favorite place to test things, Blood Aqueducts. I just put on like a tabula and whatever, just random things, and I just put some gems in. I put in Charge Dash, Cast While Channeling, Voltaxic Burst, less duration, because I wanted to make the duration of the buff on me as little as possible. And I tried. I spent like an hour changing the points around in my passive tree, changing the changing the gems that are in my body armor, and really trying everything that I could think of. I went into Discord, I chatted with my friends. I was like, yo, do you guys got anything for me, man? This feels awful. And they're like, you're crazy. What are you doing, man? So I tried. I tried really, really hard, could not make it work. But then I was chatting with my friends, and I got inspired about movement skills in general, using them to do damage and attack. And so there's some sort of like leaps of intuition here, but I thought like, is there something I want to go really, really fast. Whirling Blades is the zoom. Is there something I can do with Whirling Blades and lightning skills in general? So I started off with Whirling Blades, cast on crit, Voltaxic Burst. If you have any experience in this game, it's just a bad idea, right? That is just a bad idea, but test your assumptions, right? Maybe there's something I can do. Let's question the assumptions that are out there and see if we can make it work. Just try everything. It was bad. I couldn't make it work. But then I put in and then I went to the gem vendor. I bought every single lightning skill in the game, and I just took turns. I put in every single lightning. I went up Blood Aqueducts, put in a different skill, went down Blood Aqueducts, put in a different skill. And I spent like an hour going up and down, trying every single lightning skill. I did Whirling Blades, cast on crit, Crackling Lance. Looks pretty cool. Unfortunately, it never, gets the Kamehama, and you don't really get the cool things about it, but it looked really cool. And after all of that testing, Shock Nova felt okay, but the single target was awful. Imagine this, you're Whirling Blades, you're a cast on crit build, you're really, really fast. I was attacking, I don't know, like 7-8 times a second, but you're Whirling Bladesing left and right over the boss, trying to trigger your Shock Nova. Clunky, feels bad. So as always, I went to Cyclone. You go to Old Trusty, there's a reason why everyone does it. It is the best for cast on crit. There's funny things you can do with like Flicker Strike or something too with cast on crit, but Cyclone really there's a reason why everyone does it. So I did Cyclone, cast on crit, Shock Nova. The clear was a little clunky, not scaling AoE, so Shock Nova wasn't really clearing the whole screen really cleanly, and the single target just didn't feel really good. Even scaling it like POB, so I went to POB, I tested my assumptions. POB actually told me that the single target on Shock Nova should have felt better, but something about it just felt bad. that you have to often question what POB says. It may tell you like, okay, if everything lines up perfectly, so like actually said Stormcall was the best damage, but if you know how Stormcall works, there's like a delay and everything, and yeah, it would do like the whole delay and everything, and I could summon a bunch of Stormcalls, but then sometimes the boss would just kill me before before I did any damage. So it felt kind of bad. And I just went one step back and I thought, all right, I like the lightning skills. I like the concept. I kind of like what I'm doing here. What else can I do? What could actually clear the best? And, Arc. We got old trusty. We got Enki's Arc Witch, right? There's a reason why that was a staple for so long. Arc is a very cool skill that feels really good. So I just went to the wiki page and I scrolled through and I scrolled down the way that it scales and I looked at all the numbers and I noticed two things. It has a more damage multiplier per chain still remaining, which means it does more damage to single target, especially the more chains that I get. And I get more chains at level 26 and there's a +1 chain helmet enchant. So I figured I went back to the drawing board, I went to Path of Exile, and I figured out that I could scale my arc to level 26, get +10 chains on my arc, and then it started feeling pretty good. And like it felt pretty nice, but defensively, it did feel a little clunky. Because of my experience in the game, because I've tried many different builds, I know what the defense, like one of the most important defensive layers of cast on crit, Cosby's Malice, cast on crit, Ice Nova is, and any other cold cast on crit setup. Cold is the best element in the game for a reason. It just is, right? Fire does the big damage. Cold does the best defense and good damage, and then lightning is there to convert to cold. I mean, kind of half joking, but scaling lightning properly without it doesn't have a defensive characteristic, right? But it does have a very nice offensive characteristic. It has shock. So I used a single Call of the Brotherhood ring, which gives me, and then I put on Catalyst on it, which gives me 48% lightning to cold conversion. And because I wanted to be extra hipster, I actually kept myself at hybrid damage. And then I went to Path of Exile. I clicked on Cluster Jewels, and I just clicked through the different Cluster Jewels, and I searched for cold. I searched for lightning, and I spent 30 minutes clicking through all of them and seeing what was available to me. And there's some really, really cool notables that are specifically for people that are doing hybrid cold and lightning damage. That will just give you, if you're doing cold damage to a shock target or lightning damage to a chilled target, you get bonus damage. If you're doing cold and lightning damage to a shocked and chilled target, well, then you're looking really good on the damage. And then I spent a lot of time, and this is specifically the part about the build that is more about the polishing, the last step here, right? The making sure that everything is tweaked perfectly. With this archetype, with Cast on Crit, there are very specific numbers that you got to hit. And this was a unique challenge for me because of how hipster the build was. I spent a lot of time handcrafting every single item, and this is why it's not a build that I can just say, make this build, because it took a month for me to figure everything out, craft all the gear exactly what I wanted. There's one base on the planet that's exactly what I wanted for making sure I hit the right stuff on the weapons and everything. But if you get inspired in the right way and you want to experiment and you really put the time into it, it's about enjoying that journey of putting the build together. If you are having the maximum amount of fun going through that experimentation phase and seeing where things do and don't work and doing that problem solving, that's 95%. I'm just throwing out random percents. I don't know, most of it's game knowledge, but then enjoying doing it is where all your motivation is gonna come from. And in the end, the build ended up doing, I think I'm close to 9 million DPS. It does absolutely everything in maps incredibly well, and I can kill Maven deathless and clean with this build, which I didn't even want to. It actually far surpassed my goals. And I really wanted to share this with people because I think it's at least for me, thinking about this process, it's very, very motivating to thinking about Path of Exile as a sandbox with a bunch of toys that you just sit down in, and the fun is playing with the different toys, trying different things, and having a good time, right? The reminder is just this is a PvE game. I guess there's kind of semi-ladders on PoE Ninja, but in general, it's about finding the fun for yourself and, making a build is part of playing the game, even if it's going for a walk and thinking about the build, even if it's just fiddling in POB when you're at work. All of that is part of playing the game. And if you can have fun doing that, that is the most important thing to be good at making builds. So that is me talking for a very, very long time. So feel free to hit me with questions and everything. I understand that was like a frou-frou kind of funny way to talk about things, but for me, that is kind of like the most important way to get across the information that I wanted to for how to get good at making builds.
There. All right. Do we have any questions at the end? And thanks so much for taking time to do this.
Yeah, no, thanks for inviting me, man. It was fun.
Any questions, chat, before we wrap that up? And again, really, really good work, dude.
Thank you.
And chat, let's give a big clap for Subtractem. Is this on the test? All right, well, Subtractem, thank you so much, dude. Do you want to shout out your channel and stuff like that?
Yeah, sure. All of my stuff is just Subtractem. YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, everything. I stream Sunday through Friday, every single day. You know, actually big inspired by Zizaran's work ethic, honestly. And, you know, really, really enjoy just sharing all of my, you know, what my process is with playing Path of Exile and with all of you guys and seeing you guys grow over time. And it's been really inspiring for me to continue working. So thank you, everybody.
That's awesome. And again, thank you to everybody watching Path of Exile University. Thanks again to Subtractem for joining us. We have a lot more lessons starting tomorrow and the day after as well. So make sure you check that out. Sub if you liked the video. But as always, more importantly, try to die less than I do.